What's going on, gang? Coach Joe here to talk to you a little bit about Performa Sleep. Guys, Performa Sleep has worked with industry experts to develop the ideal mattress for athletes and active people looking to improve their performance through better sleep. Guys, Performa Sleep is proud to say that every single Performa Sleep mattress is made in the USA and ships quickly from their warehouse to your door, and hopefully gets in your bedroom pretty quick. Guys, I sleep on a Performa Sleep mattress. I absolutely love it. It's the only mattress on the market with copper cool technology, and I can say right now, as a guy who sleeps hot, who sleeps with the sweats, I don't anymore in my Performa Sleep mattress. Check it out. Folks like myself, like Dr. Danny, Lauren Fisher, Emily Bridgers, Scott Panchek are on the Performa Sleep mattress, and I have nothing but great things to say about it. So head over to performasleep.com and click their big red Buy Now button and enjoy.
What's up, guys? Doc and Jock Podcast is me, Doc Danny. The other guy is Coach Joe. And tonight we're talking about the squat, and in particular, assessing the squat. This is something that hopefully you're doing a lot as an athlete in your training. It should be a staple of your strength training, should be a staple of your movement if you're a human being in general. And we want to talk about how we actually go about assessing the squat and trying to figure out where somebody's limitations are, and also where, strength-wise they can balance themselves out a little bit. So before we get into all that, we like to catch up. Joe and I, when we do these, it's an opportunity for us to just connect a little bit. So we'll chat and see how things are going. So Joe, how are you doing?
Oh, hanging in there, doing the old. We're hanging out here in upstate New York. Well, I guess not upstate.
Is it still cold?
No, it's good. It's actually, I'll tell you, I'm glad you said that because...
Like at night, it's not cold? I don't know why I'm even asking this. It's summer, so I don't know why I asked
It's summer. No, it's still good, but I would trade I would trade the nasty winters we get up here for these great summers. It's not like that crazy heat that you guys are experiencing down south. I keep seeing people are dying. People are dying in the gym.
I heard there was a bunch of people that passed out during the Peachtree Road Race, which is... July 4th. It was July 4th, and it was really, really hot and really humid, and they had poor air quality as well. I heard there was like people dropping like flies, just seizing up on the sidewalk.
Well, we have it right now in Brooklyn. The story coming out of Brooklyn is people are passing out. They're smoking this K1 stuff, so I don't know what they're doing.
What?
I don't know. It's some synthetic form of THC or whatever.
Is that what Robert Candice was smoking whenever he jumped out of over at the hotel?
I'm not sure, but
did you hear that story? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know. I have not heard this.
Robert Candice was a defensive tackle for Mississippi or Ole Miss, and so he's from Grayson. He went to the same high school as my brother-in-law. They played football on the same team, and nice. Although I think Robert Candice was younger, his older brother played with Brandon. But anyway, Robert Candice jumped out of like a second-story building of a hotel because he was high on this synthetic pot, and he was totally fine. That's how resilient this gorilla is, man.
He landed.
Oh yeah, he landed. He hit and then got up and walked away and didn't break a bone.
What? So is this a big story?
Yeah, it was crazy. He dropped in the draft. He would have been probably top 5 draft pick, and he dropped a whole bunch because they were worried about character issues. But I look at it as like, you know how resilient this guy is? He jumped out of a 2-story building and didn't even have a scratch on him. But he's huge, man. He's probably like a 300-pound, he looks like an Ndamukong Suh kind of guy, and he literally just walked right away.
Unbelievable. Yeah, but I guess that's the stuff. I guess there's a section of Brooklyn where I guess 30 people were walking around or vomiting, passed out on the streets. It was Zombieville down there on this stuff. So
really,
I'm no angel, Danny. I'm no angel, my friend. Been known to
you're eating too many gummy bears.
Yeah, eating too many gummy bears recently, but
too many edibles.
But the thing with that is, I mean, I've not, I have some buddies who live in San Francisco by some methadone clinics and stuff, and this zombie stuff is scary. These guys just walking around broad daylight. This story that went down in Brooklyn, it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. These people are just walking around, vomited on the street, not knowing where they are, passed out everywhere. But nobody jumped out of a building and survived, my friend. That's an unbelievable
This is how I know. So I've had a handful of NFL guys come through my clinic, and every time I see them, I think to myself, I mean, I know why you played in the NFL and I didn't. Like, it's very apparent.
They're structures, right? And the thing that I noticed from these big D1 athletes and, even a guy like John Welborn, these big maniacs, they're not only big and tall, but they're thick. The girth is what surprises you. When they turn around, 100%. It's like, they've
got a big head. So their head and neck is huge. Their hands are like Andre the Giant. They've got, their wrists are probably twice as thick as mine. Ankles. Yeah. It's the stuff that, like, look, I can lift weights on blue in the face, and my wrists are not going to get much bigger, if at all. And, I'm going to have wrists the size of a 12-year-old girl for the rest of my life because of my parents. And these guys are they're different, man. They got these meat hooks for hands. So, and not only that, but they're coordinated. That's the other thing. It's just such a weird phenomenon to see that.
Well, we want to train things and eat right, but, all the fish oil in the world ain't gonna put some of that stuff in you. So
you just have better parents, or if you're like me, you should maybe play a sport like racquetball, or something where it doesn't really matter, Like,
something long.
I am in a cornhole tournament this weekend, so you guys, all right. I'm training for my whatever competition. Well, I got a cornhole tournament coming up, and I'm very excited about it because my brother-in-law, I think, are going to dominate.
All right. So what is it for? Is it you raising money for something? You just
no,
drink
it's to win.
beer together?
It's
just
to
win.
Just to win something. So a friend of mine, this is an interesting guy.
You're not doing a cornhole for cancer? This is just to win.
No,
all right,
it's just a tournament. So the guy that started this brewery is a forensic biochemist for the FBI. And awesome. He's like a legit, he's like a Walter White of beer. And, he's got crazy background in education and just apparently it's really good beer. I've never actually had it, so I'm going there. The brewery's pretty new, and they have a cornhole tournament. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to beating some hipsters in some cornhole.
The rules for this game are interesting. Wherever you go, they're never the same. Do you guys play a bunch of little? Every time I've played, there's always been little different rules, house rules, whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. That's kind of like that. But I think there's a standard, and this is there's an Atlanta Cornhole League that is running this. Yes, there's there's much more to it than just like show up and whatever. It's actually like brackets, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, no, I think the rules should be the same, and if you can add, you can play.
When you play, do you just add everybody's score up, or do you cancel out?
No, cancel out. Yeah.
There it is, cancel out.
Cancel out, in the times that I've played,
all right.
I've never actually played it as you add everybody's scores up. I'll always cancel it out.
I played with a turd at this wedding I was at recently, and you tell me this rule. I know the right answer, and so do you, and so does our audience, but you're going to be amazed at what this guy told me. If you bounce it on the board from the grass, does the point count?
Shit, man, I don't know. We never bounce it.
That's right.
I would think. I don't know. No, it doesn't.
Not count.
Okay, kick it off.
It doesn't. Yeah, take it off.
What if it's leaning? What if it's like
No, it doesn't count.
It shouldn't.
It's got to hit the board. That's it.
I can't tell you if I've ever why not just throw it on the board?
Well, you play with some weak women, or you play with like little kids, or people
you're gonna hear some bad feedback for that.
Don't know what they're talking about.
Women, you're asking for trouble. We have two women that listen to this that are probably one's probably gonna punch you.
Yeah. Well, I guess their argument when they bounced it on the board was it was on anyway. You don't have to bounce the basketball on the hoop. But I was like.
Yeah, but nobody bounces the ball on the ground and makes a shot
in
an actual game.
That's right.
That just doesn't happen. So no, I agree with you.
See.
Yeah, there's so no, I get very little competition in my life now is adult league softball, cornhole, and really anything I can play my brother-in-law in, whatever that might be. Swimming across the bottom of the pool as far as you can just to beat him by a slight amount. That's really all. That's what I really care about in life is just anything to beat Brandon Irwin.
Keeping that pecking order established.
Yeah, because I can't beat him in many things that are physically sprinting, strength related.
Strong.
He's a freak, so I have to stick to like skill-based things like darts.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's it. So, all right. Anyway, now we'll get through our athletic endeavors, with whatever you want to call it, and let's get into the squat, because we talk about these big gorillas and we talk about these people that are built differently. But hey, I've seen some shitty squats in these people. Just because you're built like Andre the Giant doesn't mean you have a good squat. In many cases, you probably actually don't.
Oh, I agree. It's crazy to watch someone who you think might be high level, and then you watch them move, and or just do something as basic as a squat, and you'll be surprised at how deficient some patterns are.
Absolutely. Well, and this is what happens in many cases is these people are so genetically gifted. They're so big and strong, fast, that they're still beating everybody. So why would the coach spend a lot of time with that person versus trying to coach up some other people that maybe are a little deficient and they can, make a team better as a whole? And so they kind of just get left alone, but that doesn't mean they have good habits. They could have really bad movement patterns, and in particular, I see this a lot. Like with these guys, they tend to have jacked up ankles, tons of ankle sprains, whether it's basketball or football or whatever it is, terrible mobility, and that really, really limits them as they get away from a very upright sport, like let's say football or basketball, to now they want to start gaining some of their movement back in their hips for just general overall ability to move, and it's an uphill battle for them in many cases.
Yeah, and then we've talked about it too. All the lifestyle factors. Nobody really understands how important it is just to keep moving, and it's really easy to just you're in a car, you're working, you're sitting at the desk. A lot of times you're just not aware of how much work you're not putting in. So that's interesting too, and it's funny you bring that up. These talented guys can kind of skate by just kicking people's butt,
right? And
then, but two, when we do get that magical pair of somebody who really puts the time in to work on the small things, I think that's what really makes the Michael Jordan super special. It's the pairing of, the work ethic and the technique and the talent to come together. Right. So what we're trying to do is bring all that together, right? Where people can get a hold of this soon enough to be like, hey, I'll work the fundamentals of this. I'll get this tested. And hopefully get the most out of their squats.
Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably squat. I'm assuming.
Yeah, hopefully.
You do CrossFit. You're a weightlifter. You're power lifter. You're just training general fitness, but you probably are including that movement in some variation in your training. And it's something that we see a lot of problems that develop with people that have good intentions. Like they know that they should be doing back squats or front squats or some variation of squat, box squat, whatever it might be, and they get themselves into trouble by, and it's not going to happen quickly in some cases depending on how well you can buffer bad movement, but they put themselves in bad positions repeatedly under load and speed and change direction and high intensity, and next thing you know their hip hurts or their knee hurts or they're just struggling to get in certain positions. Like if you put a PVC pipe over your head and you go into a squat and it's like parallel with your knees, by the time that you hit the bottom of your squat because you're so far forward, and the perception is in many cases like, oh, I have a mobility problem, right? And you totally might, but maybe you just don't really, your body doesn't understand the pattern very well, right? So when we talk about assessment, one of the first things that we really want to drill down to is this a mobility problem? Is it a true mobility problem where we're going to have to chip away at this? Or is this just a motor pattern problem where you don't really know how to squat? Because at some point in time, you were a child and you were squatting all the time and you were hanging out there playing with toys, and you were able to do that. And over years and years and years, you've lost it because maybe you don't use it anymore, or you've gained all this strength and you haven't actually worked on mobility, right?
Yeah, and that's what's cool, that breaking down the assessment in that piece in that way is I think really important, because it's really easy now. Mobility is an interesting thing. I mean, partly I like YouTube, because I'll check out some other stuff, but half the reason I jump on that YouTube page is to find mobility drills, right? There's this access is there, people see all this stuff, and I think it's really cool to just say, no, there's a difference, and sometimes a lot of your issues are with how you're moving, not necessarily with your range of motion. I think one of the coolest examples that I saw personally, I recently, when I did my level 1 this summer or past summer, it was cool because the instructors actually made that point where sometimes it's not just the range of motion or some kind of quick distraction drill. Sometimes you actually just have to work a little bit harder or smarter to get down there. And the other time I saw this was at in Houston with you working the mobility clinic and just getting folks down to breathe, and how breathing correctly can help you get some more range of motion in something even like your hamstrings, where people wouldn't realize that. So let's walk through some of these assessments, maybe where we can determine how, give us an idea how our athletes can determine if it is mobility or a motor control issue.
So there's a couple ways to start, but we'll start in the joints that in many cases are restrictors. In the squat. So first of all, you want to watch somebody squat unloaded, and also not just how they think they should squat, but have them change foot width, positioning of how far their feet are turned out, and see if there's anything where all of a sudden you hit a sweet spot where you're like, man, that's lower and it's a lot more comfortable, and maybe it's just that they are trying to push themselves into a position they don't have, but opening up their squat a little bit in terms of width, and then all of a sudden now they can drop down into a more neutral position and their spine is a better position. Sometimes it's that simple. They just need to change where their feet are, or they need to change what they're prioritizing in terms of maybe they're really pushing back super, super far, or maybe they're driving their knees forward and having some issues. So overall, you want to see, if you get somebody with some simple cueing, does it fix the problem? Because if that's the case, it's a purely motor control problem, and there's nothing to worry about. Now, that's rare. That doesn't usually happen. That's kind of the silver bullet for some people. That's not common. The ankle is something that's very limiting. And when I looked at some research when I was out in Hawaii, we basically did some measures looking at the overhead squat in correlation with joints that did mobility tests. And what we found was ankle dorsiflexion was the number one factor as to how good of an overhead squat somebody would score. And it's closed chain dorsiflexion too. So that means your foot is in contact with the ground, right? So it's important to make a distinction. So the test for that, and one of the tests that we'll do frequently with our athletes is we'll have them do this wall shin test. So get in a half kneeling position. So bring your toe, your front foot, the toe should be, I always usually start people about 3 inches away from the wall. And I want them to drive their knee forward over their toe as far as they can towards the wall without their heel coming up. So if you think about it, you're in a half kneeling position facing the wall, drive your shin forward. If your heel comes up before you touch the wall, you need to move your foot forward and find that reference points of where you're at. But ideally, we'd like to see somewhere between 3 and 5 inches of closed chain ankle dorsiflexion. So if you do this and you're a half an inch away from the wall, there's no way in hell that your nervous system is the only thing that's going to limit you from being able to get into what's considered full range of motion dorsiflexion, right? So that's a mobility problem, and that's a frustrating one because they're slow to change. Ankle is not fast to change.
Yeah, sure. And I've worked this one before, and what I've done is just thrown my hand in front of my foot as well. If you're just in the gym real quick, it's a real easy way to do it. Just put the hand in front, then maybe try to get another one, and then I'll take that assessment into a stretch that I'll do for a warm-up sometimes. I'll just get a little further away, and you'll see weightlifters do this a lot, where you just get that barbell and strap it across your knees. And work that out too. So I guess my question, why is it so much more important to assess this closed-chained on the floor as opposed to just kind of wiggling your ankle around in your foot or getting a towel up and doing it?
Well, it's specificity, right? So when you squat, your foot's on the ground. It's connected to the ground. You're not you're not pulling your foot up when you're off the ground. And I see people that they have better dorsiflexion in open chain than they do closed chain, and it has to do also with what bones are sliding on each other. So when you're in closed chain, your foot is the fixed point, and your shin and the fibula are sliding over top of that. When you're in open chain, let's say you're sitting on your bed and you pull your foot back towards your head, your shin is the fixed point and your foot is moving on that, right? So there's a difference in terms of what is actually being moved. So there can actually be a difference there. And what we care about is when you squat, your foot's in contact with the ground. So we want to assess it with your foot in contact with the ground. The other thing is we want to see, is there just massive difference side to side? Do you have a 1 inch plus difference in your forward knee excursion? If you do, that's a big difference. That could be, a sizable amount, 25 to 50% difference side to side. And that's a red flag as well. So if you have tight ankles, that's a mobility problem, right? So you're going to want to really work on mobilizing your ankles. And there's a ton of good stuff out there on our YouTube channel for Athletes Potential. We have a couple ankle distraction ones that I typically go with, where you really want to get some time under tension on the ankles. The other thing you can do is you can go after some of the fascial systems, which can be limiting as well. Some pressure-based techniques to the calf and the bottom of the foot. But that's going to be a limiter for you. Your overhead squat is going to be challenging for you to get into that unless you have really, really mobile hips, thoracic spine, and shoulders.
So real cool, Danny's letting us know that, guys, if you got your foot 3 to 5 inches, about a hand's width away from the wall, if you can't get your knee to the wall, well, then a really good sign that mobility is an issue for your ankles. And that makes a ton of sense. And two, I like that assessment because, again, it's the assessment for the ankle that's closely related to the squat itself. So make sure your assessments kind of look a little bit like what you're trying to achieve, rather than trying to do something overly complicated. Super simple, super easy, working our way up. So if their ankles are mobile enough, if they are getting that knee into the wall, what's a suggestion for the next assessment?
So I'll go upstream. I'll go to the knee. This isn't really that common to see someone that has a knee flexion problem, unless they had a surgery maybe where they can't collapse their knee. But what I'll have people do is just like a child's, I just call it child's pose, sitting on your feet position, basically.
Got it.
If you can do that and you can collapse your knee down in that position, then you're fine in terms of knee flexion. Now, the other thing you want to look at too is, do you have anterior chain restriction, which you could have? So if you lay on your stomach and you have somebody take your foot and push your foot up towards your butt, you should be able to get a fist width from your butt to the foot. So imagine you were laying on your stomach, somebody took your foot and they drove it up to where they were trying to drive it up towards your butt. Without just cranking on it terribly, you should be able to get it that far. If you're only like at a 90-degree angle at your knee, but yet you can sit on your feet, you can collapse the knee all the way, then that's a quad or high hip flexor restriction more so, because the knee is not the problem. We've already figured out that the knee flexes all the way. It's actually going to be quad tension. Now, the quad is not really tension whenever you hit the bottom of the squat, but what it can do is it can pull your pelvis forward more. It can put you in a very overextended pelvic position. So that can also cause people to have limitations in the bottom of their squat because they'll run out of room and they'll end up stopping themselves, or they'll impinge themselves in the front of their hip, which can cause a lot of problems as well. So those are two tests you can look at. You can have them sit on their feet, and if they can collapse the knee, then the joint of the knee is fine in terms of enough range of motion. And if they can't get that heel close to like a fist width from the butt, then they probably have an anterior chain mobility restriction issue.
Cool. And then I saw one too that our recent guest on the show, Quinn Hennock, was talking about the quadruped rocking stuff. Yeah, and that's another one to kind of maybe tie in some back issues as well. So
there's two. So you can look at it a couple ways. So two different ways. You can have somebody in a quadruped rocking position, which would be your hands and knees are on the ground, and you're putting your back into a neutral position. Your toes are up as if you were like squatting to where you're in dorsiflexion, and then you're going to rock your butt backward. And what you want to see is, can you get your hip below parallel? And not only that, but how far does it go comfortably, and does your back position change? So this is more for looking at something like a butt wink in a lot of cases, or spinal control. If you have it there, it's unloaded, but it's similar to the squat. You can also have somebody lay on their back, and you can take their knees and bring them up to where their chest. And if they can keep their tailbone down, they're kind of like the bottom of the spine down as they bring those knees up into a flexed position, then if you can basically say, all right, well, unloaded, you have the capacity to squat with a pretty upright torso. Now, it's not always going to transfer 100%, but it's a pretty good gauge as to how much of this is truly a mobility problem. So if I have somebody on their back and I drive their legs up and they only get to maybe 80 degrees, just shy of perpendicular with the ground, then there's no way in hell that they're just going to be able to load themselves up and that problem is going to go away. It's going to get worse.
No, and it's cool too because I've earlier days and before I started personally doing a lot of like these little assessments to test mobility, I'd always be a little confused. You'd have some super flexible, girl or some super flexible athlete, some guy walking to the gym, and then all of a sudden when they're squatting, they're losing their back and they're rounding out, and you're like, well, they're flexible. I can do all these things with them and they can do all these moves, but why are they losing their back? Why are they butt wanking? Why are these things happening? So it's also cool for a coach. You can it's the first step in teaching your athletes that, hey, it isn't just a mobility thing, but here's how to just get organized from within. And I guess the point here with that next step, after we figure it out that, hey, the mobility is pretty strong in most cases, because it's your opinion that a lot of times people pass these movement tests, right?
Yes, I would say more often than not. They I say maybe like 2 out of 3 people that I see pass it. Not to say that they don't have little things they could clean up.
Yep.
Hey, maybe you need a little bit better hip, flexion, rotation, a little better ankle dorsiflexion, whatever it is. But it's not going to grossly limit them so much. So, it's common to think that it's always a mobility problem, but it's not. It's not always the case. And another easy way to kind of take a look at this, and this is kind of something that, I would say Quinn and I also agree on, which most things I would say from a philosophy standpoint of looking at the stuff I would agree with him on is looking at the goblet squat, which is one of the better movements to assess if somebody really is limited by range of motion. So if you have somebody just counterbalance himself with a weight in the front and squat down, and all of a sudden their torso goes up a lot more and they maintain their back angle, it's not a mobility problem. It's not fixing that. All it's fixing is it's counterbalancing you from feeling like you're falling over backwards.
Well, and the other thing too, this kind of speaks to the fact that, this non-exercise based movement, it's so limited anymore, where we don't have to walk around turned on. We don't have to even think about our bellies. We don't have to think about much. I'll tell you, one of the first experiences I even had with getting into a lot of core work, and it was a study. I don't know if you were part of it, but
oh my God, are you going to talk about the one that shoved the EMG needle in our back?
Yeah, but what's funny about that test? I'll never forget it.
I'll never forget it either.
I was actually part of that, but somebody, and it was your classmate, I won't say her name, but afterwards I was complimented. She goes, you had pretty good motor control, because it was neat, because that was one of the first times, even within that study, where you could see the different layers of the trunk, and they would say, turn this on, and then kind of getting that feedback that, oh, it's right there and you could see it move, was kind of cool. So that's what's cool with coaches, if you can kind of pair these assessments, and even if you're drilling it, and you're just trying to hammer away that, hey, there's some skill-based stuff in how to move through these motions, rather than just thinking it's a mobility issue. But when you can kind of point and touch and show them, turn this on, get that going, I think you also get a lot of really good you get some results with that, just to dial people into their own body a little bit more.
Sure, and not only that, but as a coach, having somebody new come in, and this is a challenge with CrossFit coaches, unless it's set up to where you do some kind of one-on-one sessions with somebody when they first come in, and I mean, there's a handful of gyms that are doing this in Atlanta for sure. The one that Ashley goes to, CrossFit RX, they do this. I think it's 3 introductory one-on-one sessions you have to do, and what a golden opportunity to take somebody and quickly change their range of motion, right? So like,
sure.
Mobility's slow. You have a true mobility problem, it's a chip. You have to chip away at it. You have to be really, really diligent with it. You have to also apply some sort of like stabilization load post mobility that's going to help maintain that and make it a functional change. So it's more complex than just taking a lacrosse ball and stick it in your hip, right? So when you have a motor control problem and you can facilitate a change in technique of what they're doing in a fast way, and all of a sudden they're like, holy crap, now I can squat below parallel, and before I was maybe 20 degrees shy of that. All of a sudden you're now a very, very credible person in their mind from then on, because you help them in a short period of time fix a problem that maybe they've been working on for a while. So don't discount the non-mobility side of things. Now, not to say there's plenty of pure mobility restrictions out there as well. All right, and it has its place. But from an assessment standpoint, take a look at some of that stuff. And if they don't pass those, then all right, cool. Now we can give them some homework to improve hip flexion or whatever it might be. Yeah,
and again, this is kind of tip of the iceberg assessments, right? So it's like, hey, get going. So So you're not just beating some people, again, don't need to get into there's only so much time you can spend with a rubber band around your hip before you need to go on to something else too. And in a general sense, with most scenarios, it's generally also never just one thing. So even you might get bored with one, you might be getting a little bit bored in your warm up or whatnot. But for me, the issue with applying some of these tests is then you're working on a bunch of little parts that will add up to the sum of a better movement down the line. So let's talk about some of the skill. So some of the skills that we need to do to squat better, oftentimes, Danny, don't revolve around the legs pumping up and down, right?
No, I think one of the first things you can do is get organized at the spine. So like this is something like you're talking about when we taught that mobility course together out in Houston. We go through looking at spinal mechanics and some breathing patterns on the ground, and then setting the stage for people to understand what it feels like to have control on the front. And in my clinical practice, I see a lot of hip, knee, and lower back pain in relation to the squat from people that are just extremely overextended at their lower back, and they have no requisite control of the front of the spine. And the spine is a cylinder. It's not just one, sided. So you have to have diaphragm has to be in a good position, pelvic floor has to be in a good position, abdominal muscles have to be in a good position, obliques have to be in a good position, stabilizers of the lower back have to be in a good position, big movers of the lower back have to be in a good position. And all these things have length tension relationships to where if one is too shortened, the other one is too elongated, and you've inherently weakened both sides of the system. So you have to understand how to control your torso. So the ground is one of the easier places to learn that. So some breathing work, some simple stuff like even like dead bugs or hollow rocks. That's an easy place to start. I mean, I've seen people dramatically improve their squat just from going through some dead bug work, and because all they're doing is just firing muscles that we're cueing them to fire, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and I even like the simple dead bug drill as just something that I'll do every day. Either I'm going to do it. Either I do dead bug work or I do planking work every day. And even if I don't have a core issue or organizational issue, I think it's important to get those muscles loaded and firing before you're into your session so they don't have the oh shit moment, when you're trying to snatch 100 kilos. So, so cool. What I also like to do with some of this bracing sequence that we're kind of getting into, scratching the surface on, is I really also like to take it slow in the beginning and then kind of ramp it up into – okay, if I can brace nice and slow on my back, for a 10 count or, 5 deep breaths for whatever cadence, but then progress that through my warm up where all of a sudden I'm doing something like a snatch balance where then can I really in a dynamic fashion get organized in the bottom of a squat. So, I was a slow learner in school, so I couldn't just pick things up real quick. And I think my muscles are the same way. So for me, it doesn't necessarily need to be a long warm up, but it needs to be a smart one where I kind of progress from slow to fast twitchy things. So,
I think that's a great way to set it up. And that's an easy way to do it. I think that the other thing is one of my favorite ways to really retrain this or to assess it, and then the test becomes the exercise becomes a test sort of thing, is doing a goblet squat and then taking the weight and going from, maybe we start with 30 pounds, and then we go down to 20 pounds, and then we go down to 10 pounds, and then we go down to nothing. And we try to have them maintain the exact same feeling, the exact same torso angle, the exact same, hip feeling, tension, ankle, everything, as they take weight down and take some of that counterbalance away. So we're basically, stripping some of that assistance away, if you were to think of it that way, and rebuilding the motor control of that pattern, and really trying to spend some time in the position.
No, it's funny you say that. And in that test where we use the kettlebell, and again, the goblet squat's interesting, and we'll get on the goblet squat in a moment, maybe if we'd like to. But I like that test because it goes against what people traditionally do in warm-ups, where you're going from something heavy to light. Because with that goblet squat, that counterbalance does actually force you to move better. So people are always kind of freaked out when you ask them, I need weight to do that. I see it a lot, especially with the Olympic lifts where, I need to snatch heavy to do it right. To me, that's also a big issue. That to me demonstrates a complete lack of experience with the movements. And again, sometimes to me, I've said it before in the podcast, traditionally when I handle CrossFitters, I like to handle them in the opposite of what they're already doing. And a lot of times, again, there's a lot of value in doing a workout like Isabel for what you're doing for the sport of CrossFit. But when you're just ripping through reps that quickly, you don't really gain a feeling for it. And again, your trunk's just passing through a range of motion, and probably in most cases people are just hanging on their lower back, right? Rather than actually forcing them to do the movement. So again, man, if you take that 5 or 10 minutes to just kind of slow down and really be in tune with what your body's doing through, simple breathing, man, I think it pays off big in the long run. So talk to us real quick, Danny. Let's have this kind of goblet squat conversation, because I want to make sure people are using this right, because there's lots of interesting conversation, especially from past podcasts that we've had with Hunter McIntyre about some stuff about the goblet squat. But, I like it as a skill-based thing. I like it to teach. But I wouldn't use it as my primary strength builder. No. Correct?
No, you just can't. You can't load it as much, right? So you can
exactly
get
right.
way more load on the barbell. Plus, it's not as comfortable.
Yeah.
But I mean, it depends what your goals are. Like how strong you need to be. So if you're a runner, let's say that you're a 10K to half marathon runner, and you get a 53-pound kettlebell, and you can go through. You can go through a decent amount of squat-based movements with that, and it'll be pretty heavy for you, and you can gain some really good muscle endurance.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's very specific to that person, and it'd be fine. Do they need to squat double body weight? Maybe not. It's probably not going to help them at all. But having strong legs in that functional pattern would be very helpful. So, yeah, if you're looking to get strong, it's not going to help. But is it a good way to use it as like a reset for the movement? Sure. I mean, absolutely, yeah. And it's a great warm up too if you look at increasing your load.
Well, and I'd also say that if you do want to get strong, it's probably a good place to start to make sure you're moving right so you can get strong. So that's where I do like it. But yeah, I mean, again, you're going to hold a bell in front of you. You're going to be restricted there. But I think once you get to that point where you're ready for your back, or ready to put a barbell across the front of your chest or your back in a front or back squat, then you've probably laid some good groundwork to make sure your movement's good. But two, you bring up a cool point about runners. You often think about, well, who doesn't need to squat heavy? Well, someone who is marathon running, if you try to max them out in their 1-rep back squat and you're starting to do all kinds of crazy stuff before you do some goblet squatty movements like this, well, you could potentially hurt them. And again, I think a lot of times people get addicted to the pain of training more than the actual why they're doing it. So just always keep in mind when you're assessing your athletes and looking at that movement, it's important to always keep their goals in mind. You can't get wrapped up in a marathon runner probably doesn't need a double body weight back squat, and they don't need to get it at the cost of their marathon score. No. And, and you bring up a good point too about strength assessments, right? So like strength and specificity of that. So when you're working with somebody, and you could really say like, CrossFit it's a big chunk of it is weightlifting. So, you can lump both of the sports kind of into the same category, CrossFit and weightlifting, because there's so much emphasis on it in the sport of CrossFit. But when you're working with an athlete like that, and you see a gross difference a gross difference in a strength movement versus another one, let's say like back squat versus front squat, or something to that effect. What do you want to see? Like, what kind of ratio are you trying to typically look at to say, all right, well, that's pretty balanced? Yeah, the front to back squat ratio, you should probably be able to back squat maybe 15% more. You know what I mean? Something like that. It shouldn't be the back squat should be a stronger lift, but it shouldn't blow the front squat completely out of the water. And then some other things that are pretty simple, if something like a jerk or your overhead movements, you should go up about 33% per lift. So your push press should be about 30% higher than your strict press, and your jerk should be about 30% higher than your push press. Some things like that. And full lifts to partial lifts, you always want to be working about 10% more with the full lifts and the partial lifts. So there's some cool stuff you can do. An article that I reference a lot to go through my strength ratios, there's a cool writer, I believe he's out of Canada. Check out firstpull.net, and they have a cool article about the use of ratios for weakness identification and programming. And that's just a cool one. But, for me, though, with beginning athletes, it's always more important to kind of check their movement out and make sure that their butt's not shifting side to side. But some simple ratios like that are cool. Just as long as the back squat's a little bit more than the front squat, not too bad. As long as the snatch is, a little less than your clean and jerk, I think you're doing okay. But for if there is a gross, like if let's say for instance somebody can front squat more than they back squat, well then it's a time to figure out why, and then we might have to see that, right? So we'd watch them front squat and go through a little thing. But for me, it would just be a matter of generally that's going to be a movement issue where that front squat is just not as comfortable for them. They don't like to rack the bar across their chest. They can't keep their torso upright. So even that, depending on what the mover's doing, is going to take assessment to see. It's never a black and white answer with some of that stuff.
So when all right, let's say you're loading this back up. Like there's a gym here in town it's a starting strength gym,
yep.
And it's just the most boring programming. But it's a linear progression and I think they recommend like 2 years, which I mean it's as boring as it is, it works, right? So, or until you plateau and you're not making gains on that simple starting strength program. So when you're starting somebody out, let's say you have somebody that's newer and they're wanting to build their squat. What's your approach? Like how much weight do you typically have them starting with? How often do you want them squatting?
I think people can screw this up. Like you said, starting strength might be boring, but it's going to get you strong quick. So when we have a new athlete, their superpower is that they get strong fast. So you do want to get them strong fast.
Right.
And by also taking advantage of that superpower and making it a linear progression, it's also consistent. So with me, it's just a consistent ramp up. So I'll always try to start with a linear progression like that. But with me, I'll stretch it out even further where it's kind of on a 3-day-a-week program. Well, I'll take the 4 days and make it a 3-day-a-week program and then alternating the exercises. So if on 2 days, let's say you take your person's, they're going to work out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For me, to keep it interesting for them is there'll be 2 back squat days on the Monday and the Friday perhaps, and then maybe I'll have that goblet squat or front squat in between. And where on your back squat day, you'll always be linear progressing that, 5-10 pounds at a 3x5 maybe until you tap that out. On your middle day in between for recovery, we'll do some kind of a skill-based, like the goblet squat for speed or an EMOM where we're going at 50% for speed and bracing and stuff like that. So just kind of varying up the exercises can be good and stretching it out. But it's my opinion 100% that you do want to stay on a linear progression as long as possible. And even after that, I'll generally go to like a Texas-based method where we have a volume day at the beginning of the week, a fast day in the middle, and then at the end we'll do some type of lower sets but higher intensity. And even that's pretty simple. So people, if you change up exercises and you go simple but maybe mix it up just a touch, I think you can really stay linear for a long time and keep it interesting. And you've seen this probably a little bit too, but that's where kind of CrossFit can come into play with the Metcons. It's always a chance for, if you take 25-30 minutes to do the strength stuff at the top, there's no reason you can't have 15-20 minutes afterwards to do some type of a gymnasty kind of Metcon-y craziness to spice things up to keep it interesting, because linear progressions can be boring.
Yeah, they are boring. But what's your opinion on throwing in tempo stuff? It's like when do you want a beginner working on pause movements, or do you want them doing a certain tempo in terms of descending versus ascending out of the bottom?
Sure, and that's something we'll throw in on that off day, right? So they'll alternate their days per week with me when I'll do some type of a 3-day program. So that day one's going to be we'll just take squatting through it. So that day one, they're going to back squat, and that back squat's going to be our strength movement that we progress on. Then their day two is going to be that skill-based squat. So maybe we'll goblet squat it, but yeah, we'll throw in some tempo based on what they're screwing up in their movement, or or maybe it might be a tempoed kind of split squat if we're finding that they're kind of shifting from one hip to the other when they're squatting, or they're having some kind of jerk instabilities with their split. And then that day three, we return back to the back squat and we just progress that. And then as we go, but yeah, I always use that middle squat day as my day to kind of throw something at them. That's going to be the day we're going to practice. So my beginners, just to kind of sum it up, they'll squat 3 days a week, because that's going to be our primary strength builder. And the two bookend days are going to be linear progressed, and that middle day is going to be some type of a some type of a variation for skill that's just going to kind of throw the monkey in the wrench to keep them active and also to progress them on the weaknesses that we're seeing.
So I've got a strength ratio example for you. I actually had a guy came in today,
Yeah.
and I've been seeing this guy if anybody has true mobility restriction, it's this guy.
Okay.
Everywhere, but really strong. So he just PR'd his deadlift, and he's older. I think he's 40, and he just deadlifted like 470. So he had a pretty good pull, and I asked him what his best clean was, power clean and or squat clean, and his best clean was like 240. So
wow.
Yeah. And I said
50%.
That's what I told him. I was like, "The hell, man!" And then his best snatch is a power snatch at 170, I believe. Yeah. And it's 100% positional. So
is he built like a bowling ball? No, and he can't get his arms over his head. I mean,
he's very tight, but he's tight and muscular, and something like a deadlift. There's not much, just rip it off the ground, and so. But that's a great example of like what you're alluding to in terms of, some of this strength.
If it looks creepy, it is. That's a real big difference, right? And honestly,
that's a massive difference.
A guy like that might be happy with that. If that guy's main goal in life is the total X in the powerlifting, he should do that and be happy. But I would also say,
he wants to get better weightlifting.
Well, then a lot of times guys like that are going to take a step back and probably hammer away at, for one, the skills in the movement. And if they're older, it's even more important, because if they just jump into a strong guy like that, it's going to throw their barbell over their head the right way, but their shoulders aren't going to be able to handle what happens.
Right.
So this is where, it's okay to be imbalanced if you're a power lifter. That's awesome. But it's not okay to not be able to put the box over your head to grab it off the shelf. You still need to make sure you're having it. So even throwing in some overhead squatting, someone like that, I would just make sure that they're overhead squatting enough and going through those movements enough that's going to keep them happy and mobile. And also, if they are really strong, those kind of linear progressed strength days are going to be really heavy on them and taxing. So by making them do an overhead squat that they can't do as much would probably be a very productive active recovery day.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So it's another way to think about it.
It's a common problem, right?
I love guys like that. They're the dad strong guys.
He's totally he's got old man strength at this point. Yeah, he's but I mean, yeah, he's really strong, man, and he's got good movement. Like, he's coordinated. He's just literally
ex-athlete, probably.
Yeah, but he just literally can't go any further in certain positions, and I think it really, really frustrated him when there was a female in his class that out-snatched him.
Awesome.
I think by like 5 pounds. Like, it was a good snatch for her. It was like really good. 175. She hit that, and he was pretty. I think he was pretty upset about it.
Well, and I would get it a lot. There were, I've worked out with tons of guys who press more than I do. And deadlift more than I do, but they won't snatch and clean and jerk more,
right.
But it's all skill, and a lot of people don't realize it's all skill and it's all skill and positionally focused, and that's even where we get more into a programming piece. Just as you develop these skills and you do get stronger on maybe a linear progression, at the end of it, that's how you bust through plateaus. In my mind, that's when you can apply some specificity. So a cool example for this for me was when I was at 808 training, I always I'm going to low bar back squat because I can do more weight with the low bar back squat. It's more posterior chained, and we front squat a lot and I clean a lot. So that was fine. I was decently strong. I low bar back squatted quite a bit. But then as I became more focused on weightlifting and transitioned into a high bar back squat, I never high bar back squatted as much as I low bar back squatted, but when I transitioned into that squatting pattern, I hit personal records in my clean and jerk and my snatch. So applying some movement-based specifics, you may sacrifice some load on one thing, but you'll get it on the other. So weightlifting, the goal isn't to have the biggest back squat, it's to have the best total.
Right.
So if I had to sacrifice some overall back squat numbers to help get my clean and jerk and my snatch up, it was worth it. So specificity in that regard, I think, is something important too when we look at programming and why we might progress someone on a squat.
Yeah, no, that's well said, man. And, in summary, to kind of give you guys an idea of where we're going with this. So assessing the squat, number one, do you have a mobility problem? Do a couple little self-tests to see if you have the requisite range of motion to get there. Put yourself in positions that are not in standing, that look like the squat, and if you can get into a good-looking squat in those positions, then you probably have a lot of motor control work you have to do. If so, then try the drills that we talked about. Try loading through some of the goblet squat positions. Try working on counterbalancing yourself. Try working on some anterior stabilization work and see if that helps clean some of this stuff up. But really, just work on the movement itself, get in the movement more. And then when you do get into strength, linear progression is a great way to go about it. Squat a couple times a week. Start doing like different little tempos or speed-based days or skill-based days, not just going super heavy all the time. And then, figure out what your sport specificity is. So if you're a power lifter, maybe that low bar squat's all you're ever going to want to do. If you're an Olympic weightlifter, high bar squat. If you're a CrossFit athlete, then you probably need to do a variation of both, because it's going to be something that you need to kind of be well-rounded in everything.
Yeah, the CrossFitter is the generalist, and that's what's I think so interesting about the programming piece. So what I did when I was CrossFitting is I would always, whenever a season ended, I might take 2 weeks to a month off. But then when I came back, I always started my year with a linear progression. It was always more powerlifting based than weightlifting based. And then you were into more of the Metcon-y CrossFit conditioning style stuff, generally right around after New Year's Eve and Christmas for me. But it's interesting stuff. There's all kinds of ways to go. It's a big puzzle. We're complicated human beings. We can screw up the best plan with the rough night with the tequila bottle. You know what I mean? So even if your coach does everything right for you and you're moving right, you might one too many Dos Equis and you trip off the curb and you're not squatting anymore anyway. So
tequila, man, don't do it. You remember, I don't know if we told a story on this before, but
tequila.
Making me take tequila shots with you in Lanai.
Yep.
In Hawaii, and then I ate everybody's dessert at the restaurant, and I called our waiter a pussy.
That's right. That was a great night. It was a great night in the most relaxing place on earth out there in Lanai. Lanai is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
There was something we were like eating sushi. I remember
it was a really nice restaurant, and I was wasted, and and then we kept drinking sake, and then I ate everybody's dessert.
We had sake at dinner. We were drinking tequila, but also didn't we have a scotch in the bar beforehand? I mean, we were all over the place.
We were playing pool. We were drinking a couple beers and had some scotch, and we're drinking scotch and then drinking beer, and we thought we had to go faster, so we actually quickly drank all the scotch that we had left, and
we snuck
beer.
In this great bar in a
it was good scotch though.
Plastic
water legit.
Bottle.
I do remember that. It was disgusting. But we chugged it.
You can't take the pig out in public. How's that go? You can take the something out of this, but you can't put the clay. I don't know, but that's a great example.
We had it in the room, and we wanted to bring this. We had it in the room, and so we thought we were going earlier, so we chugged it, and then realized we had a little bit more time. So of course, your idea was to recommend a tequila shot on the way down, and. I don't remember the night that well, except how mad Ashley was at me the next day, and how I don't think I might have puked. I don't remember. I don't think I did, but all I remember is I going to the restaurant, being very, very sure that this was going to end bad, and then being filled in by Ashley about what actually happened.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's okay to do that.
No, it's totally fine. Hey,
You'll be all right.
I'm safe. I made it home. We were in a resort, a really nice one at that. So it was a bad place to do it. Although I do remember, and this may be too much for the podcast, but we've already started, so now I have to do it. But I remember you telling me you took a piss off your balcony, and there was a John Hancock insurance group big event that they had there, and they were having their event just on the other side of like the plants where you were taking a piss, and you told me you were like laughing at them the whole time and hopefully nobody was under you, but you did do that.
Well, we were at a nice enough place where there were no consequences for my actions. I guess either they didn't know where I was, or they were nice enough to not care that evening.
That's how we roll, man. If it's a Four Seasons in Lanai, it doesn't matter because we still treat it like a Motel 6. Doesn't matter.
You got to live your life. You know what I mean?
That's how it goes. All right, cool
good stuff.
Well, good talk, good squat assessment deal. And guys, keep an eye out too. We have something coming out. Joe and I have been working hard on putting some mobility programming together. We talk about kind of how we look at mobility and how we like to structure going after improving mobility, not just how do you tension the joints, how do you tension the fascia or the soft tissue in the right way, but how do you maintain that change and really save that change? And that's with some skill work added in with this. So Joe and I have put together a 7-day mobility program that you guys will be able to get your hands on for free here pretty soon. It should be up and running in the next couple weeks. When this comes out, it may already be out. If you're interested in that, you can head to the Doc and Jock website. It'll be accessible there. So, you guys head there, take a look at it. If it's not up, you can shoot us an email. We'll give you a better idea of whenever everything is going to be available. But we had enough questions, so we decided to put it together, and hopefully you guys like it.
No, I think they will. It's cool because, a lot of times what I like about the product is, even having written it, I'll use it because I'm just sick of searching on the internet. It's just there. It's just a mindless boom, 7 days, get it going. You know what I mean? Yeah. So fired up in that regard. I think it'll be really helpful. People who I've turned it on to like it already. And I think you're the one who told me this, but if you have the mobility without the stability, you're just kind of renting the real estate, right?
Yeah, it's just as bad as not having it, right? So
we got to own it.
And that's the important part, too, is so what do you do to maintain that change? And so it's cool. I think it's a different way of looking at it versus just just distracting everything under the sun and hoping that it fixes something. Really taking a plan and let's say a goal without a plan is a wish. So
that's right.
Get a plan in place.
Well, sweet guys. Well, this is a Doc and Jock podcast. I am Coach Joe. I'm sober today. Not like I was with Danny in Lanai months and months and months and months ago. But, we're always out to prove that if you have a body,
you're an athlete.
All right, guys, take care.
What's up, guys? Doc Danny here with the Doc and Jock podcast. And when you get a chance, head over to mobilitywod.com. You can get 2 free months of programming and subscription to Mobility Wod Pro by using the code Doc and Jock when you sign up for a yearly subscription. This is a pretty cool service. They've got daily mobility wads that are programmed. They have case studies where they look at specific issues like, hey, maybe why you're having shoulder pain and how to deal with that. They even have webinars in specific areas like the lower back or the ankle. This is a super helpful resource for yourself if you're an athlete, or if you're a coach, you can't go wrong with this. Save 2 months, use the code Doc and Jock, no spaces, and enjoy the information.